When my cousin Cody and I were in our early 20s, we went on a handful of camping trips around Colorado. This happened, I believe, when I was 22 and he was 23. It took place in Arapahoe Forest. It was my first time camping there, not Cody's though. It was in the middle of the week. Our jobs allowed us to have off days in the middle of the week, and we'd often go on our campouts then to avoid traffic and crowds. I always let Cody take charge on these trips. He's the Eagle Scout, not me. We parked by a picnic area and set foot into the woods from there. After about 15 minutes of hiking deeper into the woods, we found a good spot to set up camp. A good spot meaning a big enough clearing to fit 2 tents, the portable stove, and a campfire. The first thing we did was unpack our stuff and set up our tents. Cody has always been a lot quicker than me at pitching a tent. He does it in only a few minutes. It always takes me over 20 minutes, or rather, it always took me over 20 minutes, as I haven't been camping out in the wilderness since this. The next thing we did was create a ring of stones for a fire, then gather some sticks and wood. He did bring some fire starter and a lighter, so I guess we kind of cheated, but oh well. It was at the point in the day when the sun was going down. We had a fire going, and now Cody was grilling up some steak and burgers. One thing about Cody is he always went all out with the food on these trips, and he's a really good cook, so I always trusted him with feeding us. Of course, we had our bear spray in case the smell of the food would attract the black bear, which Cody always said was very unlikely. He always says the real thing you've got to worry about in the middle of the woods is other people. As we ate our steak and burgers, we cracked open some beers and had some classic rock playing on the speaker. If you've never been camping, you don't understand how good of a vibe moments like this are. In the wilderness, with a friend or family member and some beers, reminiscing about good times and vibing to music. As it got dark, we started playing card games on this little folding platform table we brought specifically for cards. After playing more traditional card games, we started playing Uno. And this was when we heard something out in the woods. I paused the song on my phone so that the speaker would go silent. It was clear now. We heard a person humming, and footsteps from beyond the trees, in the pitch blackness of the forest. Cody urged me to find the flashlight. I tried, but by the time I found it, the sounds had faded away. I asked Cody if that was something to be concerned about, and he said it definitely was unusual for someone else to be this deep in the woods, let alone creepily walking by a campsite with an active campfire, humming loudly. I was a bit shaken, and I saw Cody was too. We went back to playing cards, with the music much lower now. When we least expected it, a big stick landed in the middle of our campsite, making us both jump out of our skin. It didn't fall from a tree, this thing was thrown at us by someone. Cody started yelling something along the lines of, "Whoever's out there messing with us, get a life and fuck off." Then footsteps could be heard once again in the distance. They were walking away from us. I said we should pack up camp and move somewhere else. He said absolutely not in the dark. We both had bear spray, and he advised me to just keep it next to me in my tent when we go to sleep. It was the closest thing to a ranged self-defense weapon we had. We kept hearing sounds, like tree branches cracking in the distance. Sounds that you would never expect an animal to be making. Someone was out there, maybe multiple people. That much was clear. We had to go to sleep eventually, so we agreed that maybe we should take turns staying up to keep watch, to make sure that no one comes to our campsite and steals anything, or worse. Cody agreed to take first watch. He said he'd stay up and read his book, so I crawled into my tent and then my sleeping bag, and went to sleep. Waking up in the middle of the night while camping is normal. You're in a cold outdoor environment, in an uncomfortable sleeping bag. Any number of things could wake you up. I didn't yet know what woke me up. I was still in a fog. My brain didn't feel fully woken up yet. I looked up and saw a head peering into my tent. It looked like Cody. I rubbed my eyes, but really, it was the darkness that was preventing me from seeing anything of his face. I said, Cody, thinking he was waking me up to take my turn of keeping watch. I said groggily, is it my turn? I stared at the head peering at me in my sleeping bag, slowly growing more awake every second. Then I heard the zipper to the tent quickly zip up, and his head disappeared. I laid back down in my sleeping bag, but only for a second. I suddenly had some weird moment of clarity where I shot to an upright position and listened as the footsteps walked away. Cody? I said. He didn't answer. I unzipped my tent to peek out at the campsite. The fire was dead. Cody wasn't out there. I went over to Cody's tent, which was zipped up. I unzipped it and looked inside to see Cody fast asleep in his sleeping bag. I got chills. Goosebumps. Whatever you want to call it. I almost shit myself at the realization. I started shaking him awake, and when he finally awoke, I told him someone's here at the campsite. It took him a minute to come back to reality, just like I did. But when he did, he grabbed his bear spray. He said he must have dozed off while reading. He said I should sleep in the tent with him tonight, but to do that, I'd need my sleeping bag. He came outside of the tent with me and stood watch as I ran to my tent to grab my sleeping bag. In my tent, grabbing my sleeping bag, I heard that goddamn humming again from outside. I grabbed it, and Cody whispered at me to hurry up. I said, you hear that too? He said yes. We both got back in his tent and zipped it up, with our cans of bear spray by our sides. I tell you, in those moments, I wanted nothing more than for a bear to come and save the day. The hours dragged on as I stayed up while Cody slept. After 3 long, horrible hours, I woke him up and we switched. When Cody woke me up, it was almost dawn. There was light outside, so we packed everything up, and by the time we were done, there was plenty of light to hike back to the car. While we could have driven somewhere else and had another night of camping elsewhere, neither of us were feeling it anymore. This was a haunting experience, and I think we both just wanted to be in the safety of our houses. It's been 6 years since this happened, and he's hit me up a few times since then about camping, but I haven't really had interest since this experience. People are just too scary. Why was someone out there stalking our campsite? And the sight of that person's head in the dark, just looking into my tent. It was straight up from a nightmare. I may never go camping again. Honestly, whenever I was scared as a kid, my dad had always told me that in life you should not be scared of ghosts. Fear the living, because they can actually hurt you. In my late teenage years, I came into some money after my father committed suicide, and I received an inheritance from him. At the time of my dad's passing, he and my mom owned a cabin up in Oregon, by Mount Bachelor. The cabin had been put up for sale since my mom could no longer afford the payments, and renting it out was not covering the costs either. The cabin was set to go on the market for sale in less than a month and was in the process of finalizing all the paperwork with the realtor and lawyer. So for that month's time, the cabin was not going to be rented out any longer and was just going to be vacant. I saw this as a chance to get away for a while and clear my head in light of all the things going on. I quit work, packed up my snowboarding gear, grabbed my dog Midnight, and headed up in my dad's car to the cabin. My first 2 days at the cabin were normal, and nothing out of the ordinary happened. I spent my days playing with Midnight in the snow and snowboarding, and the evenings playing PlayStation or listening to music, drinking, and smoking out on the balcony. I had already stocked up on food, cigarettes, and liquor, so I was pretty much a shut-in. Aside from the occasional outing to hit the slopes, with my dog's company, DVDs, and PlayStation as entertainment, I was quite content and started to feel relaxed after all the drama that had preceded my outing. The cabin itself was 2 stories. The bottom story had the living room and a side guest bedroom, along with a small kitchen. Upstairs had another 2 rooms, along with a walkout balcony attached to the master bedroom. Most of my time was spent either in the living room, kitchen, or master bedroom. I never ventured into the other rooms and always kept the doors leading into them shut. The 3rd day came around, and I was going through my usual routine of playing with my dog, playing games, and watching DVDs. That day it was a pretty heavy snowfall, so instead of hitting the slopes, I stayed in. That's when things started getting a bit weird. In our area, there were only 2 other cabins adjacent to ours, maybe a block away from each other. All other cabins aside from these 2 were around a mile away from ours. Surrounding us was mostly forest and very tall pine trees. Both these cabins were empty, and from the past couple of days, I knew that no one was currently staying there. Around midday, while outside with my dog, I noticed what looked like footprints in the snow around the area surrounding our cabin. It was still snowing, so the footprints looked semi-fresh, like someone had just been there in the last 20 to 30 minutes before me. I thought that maybe someone was staying in the cabin near me that I hadn't noticed. Maybe they were shut-in like me. Alright, whatever. The footprints led away from my cabin, and they disappeared in the snow toward the denser part of the trees. I disregarded the footprints and went back inside. Nighttime came around, and I decided to head to bed. My dog Midnight was lying on the bed with me when I noticed his ears perk up to a listening position. This was followed by him quickly jumping off the bed and running downstairs to the living room. I lay in the bed and stayed silent. I was honestly freaked out, and I could hear him moving around downstairs, back and forth. After around 5 minutes, he ran back upstairs to me and started to do his doggy dance, the sign that he had to pee or that he wanted to go outside. Well, fine. I can't say no to him, so we both went downstairs to the outside driveway for him to do his thing. Only, he didn't want to pee. As soon as we were outside, he started to pull his leash, trying to drag me to where he wanted to go. He kept looking into the dense part of the trees where the prints had been earlier, but he also kept sniffing the side of the house and looking up toward the roof. After he figured out that I was not going to go where he wanted, he sat himself down and just stared into the darkness. A bit unusual for him, but all right. Maybe there were some forest animals out there that he wanted to chase down, but I didn't want to chase anything, so I pulled him back inside and we both headed back upstairs. Around half an hour later, I was lying in my bed when I heard what sounded like hooves walking on my roof. It was only a series of around 6 steps, and I rationalized that it could be a pine cone falling from a tree onto the roof, or maybe a kind-hearted forest animal running around. But here's the thing, the steps seemed to be spaced apart, like a man-length stride, so it was really freaking me out. Midnight also heard the noise and was quick to run to the balcony screen door, expecting me to let him out. Alright, you know what, I'm a tough guy, and at the time I considered myself to be fairly well built and strong enough to handle myself. So I grabbed my coat and shoes, along with my cigarettes and flashlight, and went out onto the balcony. As soon as I went outside, I lit up my cigarette and started canvassing the roof with my light. Nothing there, and the snow on top was undisturbed. Weird. Was it all in my head? What about Midnight hearing the noise? Maybe he was feeding off my paranoia. I started to calm down and relax again. My eyes started to adjust to the darkness, and I kept smoking and just staring at the stars and trees next to our cabin. That's when I saw it. In a tree that was a little taller than our cabin and around 20 feet from the balcony, I saw what looked like a man crouched in a squatting position between 2 branches. It looked really tall, like 8 or 9 feet, and it was really skinny. It was squatted on one branch, and its freakishly long white arms were extended above its head, holding onto the branch above it, while its mouth was wide open with no expression. What the fuck is that? I wasn't sure if I was really seeing this thing and stood there just staring. It sat there motionless. I noticed Midnight stand up and start pacing behind me and lightly barking at the same time. The thing still did not move. I put my cigarette out and was debating on shining the light in the thing's direction, but something in my head kept screaming not to. So I walked backward into the room and pulled Midnight with me. Once inside, I locked the door and shined the light in the thing's direction, but there was nothing there. I shut the curtains to the screen door and retreated back to bed. But later on in the night, I heard some light tapping at the screen door, like someone was tapping on the glass with their fingers. It was consistent and did not stop for nearly an hour. Midnight seemed to stare at the door, but he wouldn't go near it anymore. The weirdest part was that I had a feeling like someone was inviting me to open that door, but at the same time I kept hearing my dad's voice in my head telling me to stay in bed and don't do it. I listened to my dad's voice and just stayed where I was. I passed out eventually and woke up in the morning. It didn't take me long to pack everything and get the hell out of there. I was searching Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace for a new phone. This was a long time ago, so it had to be like an iPhone 7 or something. Phones still had the home buttons back then. I found this listing for a phone. It was some generic-looking post, iPhone whatever for sale, new, around $300. It was a really good deal for the time, that I remember. He told me all the small details I needed to know. That it was factory unlocked, never opened, and stuff like that. He even sent me a video of the box, still sealed. The guy, whose name was Melvin, seemed nice and easy to talk to over text. I got his number and we discussed a pickup point. His location on the Facebook ad was much closer to me, but over text he said he was only there that morning and now had gone about an hour north. I wasn't happy about that, but it was a really good deal and I didn't want to pass it up. I started asking a bunch of friends if they wanted to come on an adventure with me, really just a way of making the hour drive seem fun. My friend Martina agreed to come with me, on the promise that I buy her food for coming. Melvin sent me the address of a police precinct about an hour away, saying he only does deals in police precinct parking lots to avoid scams. I obviously had no problem with that, in fact it made me feel a little more confident in this whole thing. I picked up Martina around 8:30 at night and off we went. Her being in the car made the trip more fun, and it was a Friday night, so afterward we could go out and do whatever we wanted. When I got off the highway, we were about 10 minutes away. We found ourselves in a very quiet, secluded area. It was mostly wooded, with a few houses and buildings here and there, then more woods. When we got to the police precinct, there was no one visibly parked in the lot besides a few empty police cars. We drove around the building a couple of times and didn't see this Melvin guy, who said he was in a black Altima. So I decided to call him. He picked up and said he was having issues with his car on the side of the road and asked if I could come to him. He sent me his location, and when I checked, it was on some random road with nothing but woods on either side. He asked me to come help him jump his car. He said he had jumper cables. I said, yeah, I guess I can do that. We had already driven an hour, I didn't want to turn back for nothing. Martina was shaking her head the whole time I was on the phone. He said see you soon and hung up. Martina then basically screamed, no way, this is sketchy. We're going home. I told her we'd just drive past the location and see what's up. I agreed with her, though, it seemed incredibly sketchy. I just didn't want to waste the drive. We drove to the location. As we got close, we saw the reflection of a car's headlights on the pitch-black road. When we got closer, I slowed down. It was a black car, but we couldn't see anyone inside or outside of it. It was really dark, but I felt like we would have seen someone's head or movement. Martina said, just keep driving, and I said, I know. It was about the sketchiest thing I'd ever seen. A pitch-black road between woods, no streetlights, no other cars. A pretty convenient place to break down and wait for someone with cash to show up. I drove right past it. Immediately, Melvin started calling me over and over. I ignored every single call. Then he texted, I saw you just pass me, why didn't you stop? Turn around. I ignored that too. Martina, being a positive person, laughed about the whole thing and said, okay, you owe me food. So I looked up the nearest diner, and we stopped there. It was a small, quiet place, almost empty even on a Friday night. The waitress took our coffee order. Then a lone guy with his hood up walked in and sat at the bar. He was wearing a navy blue dirty hoodie. He glanced over at us, then looked straight ahead, talking to the lady behind the counter and ordering a coffee. The man kept glancing at our table every minute or so. I whispered to Martina, don't look now, but that guy at the counter might be the Melvin guy. The waitress came back with our coffees and asked if we were ready to order. I said, a few minutes, please. When the lady handed that man his coffee, he said loud and clear, thank you, darling. It was that same voice from the phone. Melvin, or whatever his real name was. I told Martina, that's him. We need to pay the check and leave. I waved the server over and whispered if we could just get the check. She asked if something was wrong, and I noticed the man look over as I said this. I told her we just needed coffee for the road. She got the check, I paid, and we downed our coffees fast before heading out. We got in my car, and Martina said, "Oh my God, he's getting up." I looked into the diner and saw the guy moving toward the door quickly. I pulled out of the parking lot fast and sped down the road. Yes, we saw a black car parked outside that could have been the same one from earlier. I was driving too fast for him to catch up. We got back on the highway and I was flying for a while until the low tire pressure light came on. I knew instantly he slashed my tire. The PSI was dropping fast, so I pulled over to avoid damage. When I checked, the tire was slashed. I had to replace it with the spare, which took about 15 minutes. The whole thing was a disaster. And if you're wondering, yes, I still got Martina dinner that night. Now we look back on it as a crazy story to tell people. But it's horrifying how close we were to walking right into a trap. I was seeing this girl for a few weeks. We'd been on 2 dates. Her name was Phoebe. We matched on a dating app and eventually met a few days later. She was 4 years older than me. Our first date was drinks, and our second date we went out with my friends on a weekend. My friends had neutral opinions about her. They thought she was nice and kind of quiet. They'd later reveal their actual thoughts on her, but I'll get to that later. Phoebe invited me to an upcoming high school reunion party. She told me she didn't want to go alone, and honestly, after she came to hang out with my friends, I felt like I owed her. The reunion party was on a random Saturday in the fall. It wasn't organized by her school though. She said it was being hosted by a rich guy from her class, at his house. I haven't had my high school reunion yet, but as far as I know, these things are usually held at bars or catering halls. We got to this guy's house, and it was definitely fancy. It had a gated driveway, but no nice cars parked anywhere. I thought maybe the owner parked his in the garage during the party. The second we stepped into the house, I felt like everyone was staring at us. More specifically, at me. A few people came up to Phoebe, hugged her hello, then shifted their attention to me. I felt like I was being interrogated with how personal their questions were, my job, where I lived, my family. Finally, Phoebe pulled us away, only to go talk to more people who also asked strange and personal questions. There was something odd about everyone there. They looked older than 28, which was the age Phoebe said she was. Some looked well into their 30s. I mentioned that to her, and she laughed and said, "Yeah, some of these people aren't aging too well." I asked if she remembered everyone, and she said yes. Then I asked who the host was, since I was curious to meet the owner of this big house. She said she hadn't seen him yet. The entire time I was there, I felt like everyone was shooting me daggers. They wouldn't look away either. I whispered that to Phoebe, and she said, "It's probably because they're wondering who you are." That was the only explanation I could think of too. It's hard to explain how awkward it felt, but this was not what a normal high school reunion should be like. There was no music, and everyone was dressed strangely. Not like normal 28-year-olds. Actually, none of them looked like they were in their 20s. I started feeling really uncomfortable with all the stares. I told Phoebe I was going to the bathroom, but I really just wanted a break from that room. I didn't even have a drink in my hand, so I felt totally out of place. I walked through the hallways of this big house, and even then, everyone I passed stared at me. I found the bathroom, stepped inside, and locked the door even though I didn't have to go. I just wanted a moment to breathe. I texted my friends about how weird the whole reunion felt and asked how I could convince Phoebe to leave early. We had already been there about 30 to 45 minutes, and this mystery host was nowhere to be seen. Then Phoebe texted me, "Where are you?" I replied, "In the bathroom, give me a minute." I followed it with, "This party is really weird. I'm down to leave soon." She replied, "Why?" I said, "Everyone's being weird." Right then, someone knocked on the bathroom door. I had to leave. I washed my hands quickly and opened the door. A guy, one of the younger-looking ones there, was waiting outside. He looked at me and said in a low voice, "You should leave. That girl isn't who she says she is." I froze. "Phoebe?" I asked. He said, "Whatever she told you her name is." Then he asked, "What did she tell you this party was?" I said, "A high school reunion." He smirked and said, "Do these people look like they're at a high school reunion?" He added, "Trust me, leave sooner than later." Then he walked into the bathroom and shut the door. I almost knocked again to make him explain, but I stopped myself. I was already uncomfortable and suspicious. That guy just confirmed it. I walked straight to the front door, trying not to draw attention. I could feel eyes on me as I moved through the house. I stepped outside, walked straight to my car, and drove off. Phoebe texted me asking where I went. I didn't answer. When I got home, I looked up her number on White Pages. The number wasn't under the name Phoebe. It came up as Claire Foster. The address I picked her up from both times was also different from what showed up on White Pages. Then it hit me, both times, she was already waiting on the sidewalk. I never actually saw her leave the house. I replied to her text, "I had to leave, I'm sorry," and then I blocked her number. My friends made jokes afterward. They told me they thought she was weird and off from the start, but didn't want to say anything and make me feel bad. One of them joked it sounded like I was in the movie Get Out. My friends and family all have little theories about what was going on. Some people even think I exaggerated the whole thing, until I tell them about the fake name, the fake address, and the guy who told me to leave sooner than later. This happened when I was a young child, maybe around 8 years old. My parents had me late, and my 2 older siblings were both at least 10 years older than me. One night, I was woken up by a commotion coming from downstairs. It was my parents. I cracked my door open and heard them freaking out about something, though I couldn't tell what it was. I went to the top of the stairs and called out, "Mom? Dad?" My mom came to the bottom of the stairs and said, "Go back to bed." I listened without asking questions, but I could tell they were stressed about something. I tried to fall back asleep, but soon after, I heard the front door slam shut, followed by silence. I figured they had left the house, though I didn't know why. Either way, I did what my mom said and went back to bed. Sometime later, I woke up again to sounds downstairs, the door closing and footsteps, but no voices. I assumed they were back and just being quiet so they wouldn't wake me. I heard occasional thuds and drawers opening and closing, and I was pretty sure I heard the fridge door too. I thought it might be my older brother, Chris. He was already driving at the time and often came home late, so him rummaging through the fridge at 2 a.m. wasn't strange. Those were the explanations I told myself to stay calm. Then I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. They got louder and closer until they reached the top and stopped right at my door. The door slowly creaked open. I didn't sit up, I just lay still, staring. There were no lights on outside my room, only a dark shape standing in the doorway. I whispered, "Chris." "Mom? Dad?" Then louder, "Who's there?" No reply. The door quietly shut again, and I just lay there, frozen. I heard the footsteps go back downstairs. I convinced myself it was my dad checking on me, though I didn't understand why he wouldn't answer me. After some time, I heard nothing more from downstairs. My curiosity got the better of me. I got out of bed, keeping the lights off, and went down the stairs slowly. When I reached the kitchen doorway, I froze. There was a tall figure standing in the middle of the kitchen. "Dad?" I said, assuming it was him based on the person's size. A deep voice said, "Go back upstairs." I ran. I sprinted up the stairs, slammed my door shut, and jumped under the covers. My heart was pounding. All I could think about was how strange my dad's voice had sounded. The thought that it could be a stranger didn't even cross my 8-year-old mind, not until I heard the front door open again and my parents' voices coming from downstairs. I rushed to the top of the stairs. They were surprised to see I was awake. I asked what had happened, and they told me that Chris had been in an accident but was going to be okay. Months later, I learned the full story. Chris had been in a car accident after driving in a condition he shouldn't have been in. My parents got a call from the hospital and rushed out immediately, leaving me asleep at home. I asked my dad if he had come into my room that night, and that's when I found out they had been gone for hours. My mom started yelling at my dad when she realized he had forgotten to lock the front door before they left. When I told them about the person at my door and in the kitchen, my dad grabbed his gun and searched the house while my mom called the police. The last thing I remember that night was a police officer asking me to explain what I saw. My parents said they felt like idiots telling the cops that they had left me alone in the house with the door unlocked. Nothing valuable was stolen, but whoever broke in clearly wasn't there to hurt me. Still, having a complete stranger inside your home is terrifying. Now imagine going through that when you're only 8 years old. I once worked as a direct care aide for a 65-year-old woman with a developmental disability. Her daughter, who was in her 40s, worked overnights and needed a caretaker with medical experience to watch her mother during those hours. When I say I worked for them once, I mean it literally. I only worked one night, and you're about to hear why I never went back. The woman's name was Martha. Her daughter, who contacted me, was named Colleen. It seemed like Colleen didn't have any other family to watch her mother. Maybe she didn't want to or couldn't afford to put Martha in a nursing home. Or maybe she just felt safer hiring someone with experience. At the time, I was already working with 2 other women who also had developmental disabilities, so I had some background. But nothing prepared me for what happened that night. Colleen left for work earlier that day. I had already worked my first job, so my body was exhausted, but I wanted to make as much money as possible. Before leaving, Colleen introduced me to Martha. Martha gave me a small smile before Colleen brought her upstairs to her bedroom for the night. It was around 9 p.m. Colleen told me that sometimes Martha would walk around the house at night, confused, and I'd need to calm her down and bring her back to her room. I asked if it was sleepwalking. She said no, it was one of the symptoms of her mother's dementia. I told her not to worry, I'd know how to handle it. The evening started off fine. I spent my time in the living room watching my show. These kinds of jobs aren't very exciting. Most of it is just sitting around. After a while, I heard footsteps upstairs. I went to the stairway and called out Martha's name, asking if she needed anything. She didn't answer. I heard her footsteps go back to her room and the door close. Maybe she'd gone to the bathroom, I thought. I went back to watching TV. About an hour later, I got up to grab the sandwich I brought. As I was leaving the kitchen with my plate, I nearly dropped it when I saw Martha standing at the doorway. The plate shattered on the floor. My heart almost jumped out of my chest. I apologized to her and asked if she was okay. She suddenly started yelling, "Who are you?" I reminded her that I was her care worker, here to make sure she was fine. But she kept shouting, "Why are you here? I don't know you." I tried to calm her down, explaining again that Colleen had hired me to watch her. After a while, she seemed to accept it. I gently led her back upstairs, gave her a glass of water and some melatonin, and made sure she took both before heading back down. Hours passed. I was exhausted. There was a small spare room upstairs where Colleen told me I could rest if I needed to. Martha seemed asleep from the melatonin, so I decided to lie down for a bit. I fell asleep quickly. Maybe an hour later, I woke up to a strange sound from downstairs. It was a repeated slamming noise, every 1 or 2 seconds. Something heavy was being slammed. My heart started pounding. I got up fast, moving as quietly as I could, and followed the sound to the kitchen. What I saw was like something out of a horror movie. Martha was in the dark kitchen, standing in front of the oven, opening and slamming it shut again and again. I could only see her silhouette. I said her name loudly. She stopped, turned her head toward me, shut the oven door one final time, and started walking toward me. As she got closer, I said softly, "Are you okay?" Her face was blank, completely expressionless. She walked right past me and went up the stairs. I followed her up, but when she reached her room, she slammed the door shut. I knocked and asked if she was all right. No response. I slowly opened the door to peek inside. She was standing at the side of her bed, facing the wall. Just standing there. It was one of the most unsettling things I'd ever seen. I gently guided her into bed, pulled the blanket over her, said goodnight, and left. I went back to the spare room, planning to stay awake for a bit in case she got up again. But exhaustion won. I fell asleep. Sometime later, I woke up again. The room was dark. My alarm hadn't gone off yet. Something had woken me. Then I heard a sound from the closet. The door was cracked open, and I could see the black shadow of a head peeking out. My chest tightened. I whispered, "Martha?" No answer. I said her name again, over and over. Then she pushed the closet door open and started walking toward me slowly. She was saying the same things as before. "Who are you?" "I don't know you." My voice shook as I tried to calm her down, reminding her who I was. I reached for the lamp beside the bed and fumbled with it until I turned it on. That's when I saw it. Martha was holding a huge kitchen knife. My heart stopped. In that moment, everything changed. She wasn't just confused. She was dangerous. I screamed, and that seemed to startle her. She screamed back, still shouting, "I don't know you." I wasn't about to reason with someone holding a knife. I ran. I jumped off the bed, darted around her, and sprinted for the stairs. She swung the knife once, weakly, but it was enough to tell me she meant it. I ran out of the house barefoot. Instead of calling 911, I called Colleen, like she had told me to do if there was ever a problem. She was yelling at me not to leave her mother, but I yelled back that Martha had tried to stab me. I stayed outside, watching the house from a distance until Colleen got home. When she went inside, she found Martha asleep in her bed, and the knife lying beside her. Colleen accused me of exaggerating, until she saw the knife herself. I didn't tell her I had fallen asleep, because I didn't want her blaming me for anything else. She even offered me the room to rest again if I ever wanted to come back. I never did. Martha was the scariest patient I ever had in my 9 years as a direct care aide. When I was 23, I had to move out of state for work. I still work for the same company today, but thankfully I've since moved back to my hometown. Back then, though, I needed a place to live that wouldn't break the bank. I made posts everywhere I could think of: Facebook, Craigslist, Twitter, even my neighborhood subreddit, looking for a roommate. Eventually, a guy named Rob reached out to me on Facebook. He said he had a room available in his house. I looked at his pictures first. He looked like a normal guy. I was open to living with a male roommate as long as he seemed normal, though my parents were strongly against it. Rob and I FaceTimed, and he gave me a virtual tour of the house. It was a modest place in the middle of town, about 10 minutes from my new office. He owned it outright, which was impressive, and he seemed nice enough. His price was fair, his rules were fair, and the place was available to move into immediately. Perfect. A week later, I packed all my things and drove down. Rob greeted me out front and handed me a key. He was shorter than I expected, about eye level with me. He helped me carry in some of the heavier bags, showed me my room, and told me it was already furnished. He said one of his friends had just moved out. I replaced the pillows and bed sheets with my own, of course. That first day was just me settling in. Rob seemed eager to get to know me, which I took as him trying to make me feel comfortable. Nothing weird yet. The next day was Sunday. Rob offered to drive me around town and show me the best spots to eat and shop. I wasn't really in the mood, but I said yes to be polite. He drove me around and then suggested we grab lunch. I wasn't hungry, and the way he said it felt more like a date than a casual meal. I politely said no. Then he offered to grab drinks instead. I said I don't drink on work nights. He kept pushing, saying, "Come on, just a couple drinks." I declined again. He went silent after that and seemed upset. I started feeling uncomfortable, but I brushed it off. That week was my first at the new job, so I didn't have time to think much about Rob. But a few days in, I came home to do laundry and noticed something strange. My hamper looked different, like the clothes had been moved. When I started loading the washer, I realized one pair of my underwear was missing. I tore my room apart looking for it, but it was gone. My stomach sank. The thought crossed my mind, what if Rob? No, I couldn't let myself believe that yet. I wasn't about to confront him either. Still, I started wishing there was a lock on my bedroom door. That weekend, I went to Ace Hardware and bought a lockable doorknob. While Rob wasn't home, I swapped out the old one. Now I could finally sleep feeling a bit safer. I planned to tell him the next time I saw him. He didn't come home that night, though. His schedule seemed pretty random. At around 1:30 in the morning, I woke up to loud banging on my bedroom door. It was Rob, yelling my name, sounding angry. My heart was racing. I stayed quiet, pretending to be asleep. I had a bad feeling this was about the doorknob. The next morning, I saw several texts from him. We need to talk. Be home after work. I replied, is this about the doorknob? And he immediately texted back, yes. I apologized and said I meant to tell him. He replied, it comes off today. His tone was cold and aggressive. I took a moment before responding and explained that I'm a woman and just feel safer with a lock for privacy. He softened a little, but still refused. He said the old doorknob had to go back on. I felt upset but tried to respect it. I also knew I technically installed it without permission, so maybe he had a right to be annoyed. But then I wondered, how did he even know I changed it? I had hidden the old knob. That thought made me uneasy. Had he tried to open my door that night? The next day, I changed it back and returned the new knob to the store. A few days later, there was a knock at the door. Rob wasn't home. A girl around my age was standing there. She asked, are you living here with Rob? I said yes. Her face went serious. She told me to get out of there immediately. She said Rob had multiple restraining orders from different women, that he was a dangerous stalker. I was speechless. I asked how she even knew I was living there. She said she saw me moving in and wanted to wait for a time when Rob wasn't home to warn me. I thanked her over and over. I was terrified. I had already paid Rob for the month and didn't know what to do. She gave me her number and left. I started packing right away and looked for somewhere else to live. I found a studio apartment across town, slightly more expensive but available immediately. I contacted the owner, and she said I could move in as soon as possible. Perfect. I texted Rob, saying I had to move back home for family reasons and would leave tomorrow. He didn't reply. An hour later, he came home and asked about my text. I repeated the family story. He said, yeah, I'll give you the money back tomorrow after I go to the bank. I was relieved. But about an hour later, he knocked on my door again and asked, did some girl say something to you? My heart dropped. I lied and said no. He stared for a moment, then said, never mind. It just seems like you're leaving for another reason. I insisted it was family related. He said okay and walked away. That night, I woke up and screamed. There was a black figure sitting at the end of my bed. It was Rob. He turned and put his hand over my mouth, whispering, shoo. I said, please don't hurt me. He said, why would I hurt you? I know someone said something to you. Don't believe what these girls say. I told him he was scaring me. Then he reached out and started caressing my leg, saying, I don't mean to scare you. That was it. I jumped out of bed and ran for the door. He shouted, stop, as I bolted outside. I called the police from the bushes across the street. When they arrived, I told them everything. They made Rob come outside to talk. I told the officers I just wanted to grab my stuff and leave. They stood by while I packed and loaded my car. I also demanded that Rob Venmo me the rent refund while the police were there, and he did. The whole time, he tried to act like a normal, calm guy. But one of the officers quietly told me that Rob had been arrested before for similar incidents with women. Rob denied everything, said he never went in my room or touched me. It was just my word against his. I left that night and checked into a hotel. The next day, I moved into my new apartment. I've never, and will never, live with another man who isn't my boyfriend or husband. Or honestly, anyone I don't know well. Ever again.